inform me about our human journey and where we're at as a planet and as our relationship to that planet is in transit. And so, to back up, my background was in chemotherapy development at the University of Virginia, and the way I got to that was through mitochondria. So my specialty was in endocrinology and metabolism. Metabolism is the word for energetics, basically. So this is the energy of the cell. In your biology 101 and everything else, you learn that the mitochondria are part of the endothel that is the power plant, all that stuff. What they failed to tell you and I was that it's not a human cell, and that it's actually a bacteria that lives inside of our cells. So that's been the dirty little secret that medicine has been keeping from all of us for a long time, is that the only place we get energy is from the microbiome that lives within our cells. And so all this conversation over these many years of the gut-brain axis and the importance of gut health, and the gut health is everything, it's still only giving you a tip of the iceberg story. Because in a healthy human gut, we now understand there to be about 40,000, 50,000 species that we've categorized. We're probably 10x off the real number. So it won't surprise me if in 10 or 20 years we're at 400,000 species of microbiome within our bodies, not just in the gut, but within every organ system, which is the new understanding through genomics. As we start to decode the genomics of the brain, we find out that there's healthy bacteria, fungi, a whole ecosystem that lives within our central nervous system, within our liver, within the breast, within the prostate, etc., etc. And so what we thought used to be this, relegated space for bacteria, and then this sterile human body behind it, that whole understanding has really been corrupted by science. But it showed us a completely different view, is that we are a constant and complete ecosystem of multi-dimensional existence. And so it begins with this bacterial story. We'll give it 40,000 species for now, at a total of maybe 1.4 quadrillion organisms. So 40,000 species, each of those heavily populated, so you're 1.4, 1.5 quadrillion, which is 1,000 trillion. And so it comes to be a pretty big number. You're about 150 bacteria for every human cell. And then you go to those mitochondria. And the mitochondria are these tiny little bacterioids, these little guys that are called archaea, an ancient bacteria that at some point around 3 billion years ago absorbed a methane-producing bacterium. And so it's an archaea, which is a fermenting bacteria, so it creates energy through fermentation, absorbed a methane-producing bacterium, and the result was the first mitochondria. As soon as that occurred, it allowed us to do something called respiratory metabolism, utilizing CO2 and oxygen as a cycle to pump energy out of long carbon chains, fatty acids or glucose, which are of course the result of the other little bacterium which live inside of plants, which make them green. So when we see a green fern, you're really looking at a machinery of bacterium that live inside of those plant cells. We don't like calling them mitochondria when they're in plants because they would give plants too much credit. It might start to sound like nature is all one thing, and that would really screw up our whole paradigm of being human. And so we call them plant plastids, Plastids, when they live inside of a plant cell. But these are mitochondria. These are mitochondria that live inside the plant cell, and they're specialized to do the opposite thing of our mitochondria. These guys take CO2 and build it into long carbon chains. What's the whole thing with the long carbon chain? What's the purpose? To store sunlight. And so the process of photosynthesis in chlorophyll is the process of capturing sunlight as it radiates through the leaf and capturing it in a battery of a double carbon bond. And so when you start to build long chains of carbon in the form of glucose or fatty acids, all you're really talking about is the most efficient battery on Earth for sunlight. The beautiful thing about glucose and fatty acids is it takes no energy to store it. Your battery in your phone or whatnot needs constant recharging even if you don't use the phone. If you notice that, you don't use it, the damn thing runs out. You gotta recharge it. It's because there's a cost to the energy storage in all of the mineral-based batteries that we utilize. What's the difference between life and physics, or biology and physics? Is efficiency. biology cracked the code on energy storage when it found the ability to store sunlight in long carbon chains. Life took this paradigm leap on the planet when mitochondria learned to break those double carbon bonds to release sunlight inside our cells. And so my specialty of endocrinology and metabolism was to understand how do we liberate energy from the plant world, basically, from your food. And what you find out very early on in your journey into metabolism is that you cannot get any disease until you mess up metabolism. The very first step towards disease or disorder of any biologic process is a reduction in energy production. If you have unfettered access to energy, you are a repairing machine. You can never be injured because every injury stimulates stronger repair and you end up stronger than you did before you got injured. That's what it means to be 2 years old. 2-year-old falls down, scuffs their knee, they're bleeding, they're crying. 2 days later, not only is there no scab, there's no evidence that they ever tore that knee. The healing is so complete. You have to really cut deep and do something pretty traumatic to a 2-year-old to get that to actually scar, right? I split my leg open when I was 5 years old climbing in the jungle gym, 45 stitches. There is, I'm not going to pull my pants down right now for you, but I can guarantee you there is no scar. I was 5 years old and split it open, 45 stitches and no scar, because I was a healing machine, because I had unfettered access to energy. So that was where I was studying chemotherapy, was the space of energetics of cancer. Cancer is the end stage of losing energetics. Mitochondria and their damage within that system is the beginning of the cancer journey. In the 1980s, at the population level, we started to have evidence of a collapse of metabolism. I grew up in the Reagan era. That was when I had my first real impulse of political intent. But if that guy can do the presidency, I think I can probably do it too. Nancy Reagan, you'll remember, had the war on obesity for the first time, 1986. The war on obesity was a new phenomenon. And the whole story was, well, it's because we're eating too much fat and we're eating too much sugar. So you should do fat-free everything, and you should be sugar-free everything. So here is aspartame, which is formaldehyde, and here is completely processed, adulterated milk products that have no fat left in them. And the result was an acceleration of chronic inflammation and everything else. The irony of the situation was we had been eating high-fat, high-sugar diets since the origin of mankind, really, but certainly since the mid-1800s. We had perfected sugar processing in around 1880 when we went to steel processing, grinding of grains and sugars. We had nailed it by the late 1800s. We were eating gobs of sugar, and there was no war against obesity because we hadn't collapsed our ability to get energy out of those carbon chains. Sugar and fat are the same thing to the mitochondria. They're just batteries. And so when we stop being able to break down those carbon chains into energy is when we started to store the energy instead of burn the energy. And so in 1986, 10 years after the advent of glyphosate, the most potent antibiotic in our food system, we start to see the collapse of human metabolism at a global scale. And so 1986 rolls along, we're getting obesity because we can no longer get the glucose and fatty acids to the cells that are calling for them. So here your brain is counting every calorie in because it knows that the energetics of the body, your healing capacity depends on that in. So the brain starts calling for food and it never gets there. It stops in the liver, it stops in the bloodstream, returns to the liver, stores as visceral fat because all the cells don't have the mitochondria left to process that battery into power, because the mitochondria are dying, because the mitochondria are bacteria that are extremely sensitive to antibiotics. So when we started eating and drinking the antibiotics of glyphosate, which is the most abundant weed killer on the planet, we saw the obesity epidemic begin. Fast forward 10 more years, 1996 rolls around, and suddenly we get genetically modified Roundup-ready crops. And now we can spray our food directly and reach concentrations of this chemical that could have never been imagined in 1988. In fact, Monsanto was publishing their own cancer data saying, yeah, of course Roundup causes cancer, but it's at such a high dose that it causes cancer that we'll never reach that because it would kill the crops. 1988. They couldn't even believe in their own minds that within 8 years they could genetically modify crops that they could spray with high concentrations of this chemical and not kill them. So they couldn't even imagine their own success at that point. 1996 rolls around and we start spraying all of our food directly. It was really 1992 where we first did this trick with wheat. And so in 1992, it was an Irish farmer actually in Northern Ireland was first to see that he was going to lose his crop of wheat that year because the winter was arriving early. You cannot harvest grains, especially wheat, if it's not completely dry. So if you're sitting there in September and suddenly winter's moving in on you and you haven't got a dry enough crop yet, the wheat hasn't stood in the field long enough to desiccate, you have a problem. You're going to lose the crop. If you cut it early and it hasn't dried, it grows fungus and molds and you can't get it to market. So this is clever farmers like, well, when I spray a weed, within 24 hours it is so desiccated and dried out if I spray it with Roundup. So he went and sprayed his entire wheat field with Roundup. And the next day it was completely dry and he successfully harvested his crop before the storm hit. Word got out. Within a year, Monsanto relabels their product not as a weed killer now, but as a desiccant. And we started spraying wheat all over the world in 1993, 94 with glyphosate. Within a year of that, we had to create a new Medicare code for a new disease called gluten intolerance. Our science lab has been showing the exact mechanism for 10 years now of how glyphosate, when added to wheat, creates the gut injury of leaky gut that has given us this phenomenon of widespread gluten sensitivity. You can go to whole categories now. It's now like a $60 billion industry of gluten-free stuff. I can promise you there's not a single human on earth that's really gluten sensitive. We are all glyphosate sensitive. And it wasn't until we put those both in the same bite of food that we created a torrent of leaky gut. And so we are now in a space of realization that by killing the metabolism of the body, we have slowed the repair process of life. And what we have shown in the lab is that as you start to add glyphosate and gluten together, you destroy about 80% of your protective membrane. So you can imagine 80% more work every single day for your immune system to fight everything. So you fast forward through this to 2006, and by this time we suddenly realized we have an autism problem. Autism is going through the roof. By 2015-16, we have a cancer problem. Leukemias, lymphomas, everything else. What I just described to you over those 4 decades is exactly the public health consequences of killing mitochondria, i.e. not being able to liberate the energy from the glucose and fatty acids that was created by the green plants that put that energy into a space that we could utilize it. And so we went from obesity to autoimmune disease, including celiac and all that weird stuff. But by the time I was an endocrinologist in 2002-03, we were doing studies in young girls at age 12 showing that in the United States, 25% of girls at age 12 already have antibodies to the thyroid by 2002. And so you can imagine how this has been accelerating. So autoimmune disease then moves into neurologic disease. A single human neuron has 2,000 mitochondria in it. A typical cell, 200. So to be a neuron, you need 10 times more energy than your typical cell because you're actually a massive, massive infrastructure as a neuron. A neuron is one single microscopic cell that starts at the base of my spine and goes 1.2 meters all the way down to my big toe. That's a single cell with this long projection, this long axon arm that reaches all the way down to my toe. So my longest nerves are over a meter long. To get information and resources moved through that supply chain that's a meter long when you're only, this microscopic thing that's less than a quarter of the width of a human cell at your cell body, you need so much energy. And that's why you need 2,000 mitochondria packed in every nerve. And so as you start to increase the concentration of Roundup in the public water system, in the public food system, and in the air we breathe, there's going to be a collapse of neurologic function. By 1998, you start to see the uptick of Alzheimer's in women. That now goes logarithmic by 2008. Parkinson's in males, 1998, goes logarithmic by 2008. Autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, same decade. So we started to undermine our neurologic capacity for coordinating complex neural activities such as sensory processing as we declined in our capacity to reproduce or recapture energy from the plants that we're consuming. And so we've been on an extraordinary 40, 50-year journey into an experiment of what happens when you collapse metabolism, i.e. collapse energy systems within biology. On the planetary scale, it has followed suit. We are now understood to be in the 6th great extinction. We have lost 50% of life on Earth in the 50 years that I just described. First patents from Monsanto on Roundup, 1974. First widespread use, 1976. So from 76 to 2016, that period was that 50-year journey into the collapse of life on Earth. We have now 97% of the Earth's arable, farmable soils are depleted or severely depleted of carbon and other critical nutrients. I mentioned carbon is the battery for life on Earth. It is the energy storage. So when you hear all this story about carbon and blah, 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 CO2 is bad for us, we couldn't have a more backward story. CO2 is literally the life force of all living life that we understand. Without CO2, we die. The more CO2, the greener things get, if the soil is alive. We started using a broad spectrum antibiotic in our farming practices, and we wiped out soil microbiology. And unfortunately, everything on Earth is made from water, and that glyphosate happens to be a water-soluble toxin. And so by the late 80s, we were drinking and eating Roundup. Farmers have to use Roundup pretty sparingly because it's A, expensive, and they're covering thousands of acres with it. Your common homeowner, no problem, 25 bucks for a gallon of Roundup, and they can spray down the entire driveway to kill all 4 dandelions that were growing there. That's what we were doing by the 1980s. We had Super Bowl commercials with the guy with the backpack, you remember it, dramatic soundtrack, garage door going up, walks out, 2 pistol grip sprayers, backpack emblazoned with Roundup. And he shoots down those 4 dandelions. They go, ooh, we remember this stuff. At least those that are old enough. You don't have to raise your hand. We remember the idea that weeding can be easy. And maybe it's the unifying feature of all of humans. We don't like to weed. But I love it because every time I say that, somebody in the audience is like, I love weeding. I love getting out there. I do. So it's not actually a unified experience, but it was symptomatic of the time. We lost our workforce post-World War II, right? After World War II, everybody decided they wanted to go into tech and everything else. Nobody wanted to stay on the farm. Previous to World War II, we were an agricultural country. Everybody was a farmer. Everybody stayed on the farm. Everybody was some rancher or farmer. We were all touching ag. Come out of World War II, suddenly we were a technological machine built to burn energy, fossil fuels primarily. So in this journey of needing more and more convenience on the farm, we bred the need and the opportunity for a Monsanto to occur. Monsanto could have never guessed its own success. It was just a chemical warfare company. It never was in the ag industry anyways. It was making so much money selling Agent Orange and all the other critical chemical warfare elements for decades. We were in that Vietnam War for 26 years. And they had a cash cow going, and then suddenly the war ended, and they weren't selling it. Now they're selling it again under the form of Bayer and all the rest under something called 2,4-D. 2,4-D is Agent Orange. Kind of trippy. We created the demand for 2,4-D because we sprayed so much Roundup that the weeds became resistant to Roundup. So we have now through the Midwest 14 of our states covered in Roundup-resistant weeds that no longer respond to a typical therapeutic dose, and so we have to really pound it. So now we're pounding the Midwest with not just one chemical, genetically modified Roundup Ready. The FDA and USDA approved for U.S. use 5 years ago a 3 GMO seed that can handle Roundup, atrazine, and 2,4-D in a single seed, genetically modified to be able to spray all 3 toxins. The downstream consequences of this is it gets into the entire ecosystem. And so today we try to eat organic. We run around at a place like this called the quote-unquote natural. You have to take that word super, super lightly. Lots of salt. But we're at least a food expo, right? So Natural Food Expo. Why are we here? Really because there was a demand from consumers saying we need healthy food again. And so that's why we're here. It's why all of us created all these products and did all this stuff. The reason why they suddenly needed this is because they were watching the failure of their own health. And so we're trying to eat organic. We think we're doing something good, but it turns out that 75% of the air we breathe and 85% of the rainfall that we touch is contaminated with Roundup. And so when you start to realize that we're using 4 billion pounds a year of this chemical in our soil and agricultural systems, you realize there is no escape. We are literally testing the end capacity of humanity to live in a sterile environment. And the answer is we don't live long. So the predictions right now, I'm going to say this with a smile on my face because I want you to feel all the optimism in my heart, is that we don't have to go this direction. But we are currently looking at a 60-year journey into our own extinction. And I put a smile on my face because it's heartbreaking if we really absorb this information for real, because all of you are touching somebody who is struggling with fertility right now. Everybody has lost a child or is having multiple miscarriages or is doing IVF because they can't get pregnant after years and years of trying. And this was thought to be a Western problem for quite some time. In the United States and all other Western countries, we had a 52% decline in sperm counts over just the last 40 years. That puts 1 in 3 males now infertile in all Western countries by sperm count. 1 in 3 infertile in 40 years. That line is not slowing down. And so as you extrapolate that out, we're only 20 years away from having 1 in 2 males infertile. Another 15, 20 years after that, you're looking at 1 male in 5 that might be fertile. And so it is going to become increasingly difficult to become pregnant as a human being, but also as an earthworm, as a dog, as a cow. Fertility on the planet is dropping because we're killing our ability to get the energy out of the sun to a living cell, because we're using antibiotics as a matrix for our largest economies on the planet. So here we are, and we're here together. And in the midst of this, 12 years ago, under the microscope, we're studying all the effects of glyphosate, and we're watching fossil soil from 60 million years ago deliver the antidote to the toxin that we have killed the planet with, namely her soils. So I want you to take this in. 60 million years ago, nature planted in her soils an antidote to poison that would bring about the 6th great extinction by killing her soils. This has become my biologic definition of grace. That is such a graceful poetry by which nature would predict the insanity of a species that would come along thinking ourselves separate from her and in combat with her nature. And we would try to kill everything. And my field of medicine is the worst of this. We literally wake up every morning as hospitalists. I'm an internal medicine doc before endocrinology. And as an internist, I'm literally trained to kill everything. I wake up in the morning and I walk in the hospital and I'm like, what do I need to kill today? Okay, 5 bacteria on this patient. Got to kill all that. Fungal infection over here. Got to kill the fungi. None of that going on. My God, 17 patients with cancer. I need to kill all the cancer cells. We literally are trained to kill everything in the environment in an effort to sterilize the human experience until there's health. And the answer to life in the end is a connected reality of living systems. And so over this last 12 years, as this product has given us more and more understanding of the way that nature designed life to occur, we have become more and more humble in our self-identity as a human species. This product is specific to the communication network made by bacteria and fungi. This is the first gut health product that really came along that wasn't a probiotic. It's sterile. There's no bacteria or fungi in this thing. By the time the soil has been pressed down in the earth for 60 million years, it is sterile. There's no more life within it. But there is the memory of life. And the memory of life is held in long carbon chains that are surrounded by oxygen and hydrogen. And when I saw these molecules for the first time in 2012, I got goosebumps all over my body, and I said, that looks a heck of a lot like the chemotherapy I used to make. I think this could be a redox molecule. Previous to that moment, I thought that only mitochondria inside human cells made redox molecules. At that moment, the realization that, of course, the bacteria in the soil, just being other bacteria, would have to make their own communication network, just as the mitochondria inside our cells do. So yes, they're the powerhouse of the cell, but they're also the cell phone towers. Without mitochondria, you cannot communicate one cell to the other, and with a loss of communication, you don't know where your injuries are, nor do you know what resources you need. And so in one fell swoop, as we wiped out the microbiome and the mitochondria, we literally lost not just our energy system, but our communication network. And for that, human health and biology on Earth has collapsed. And so what we're learning from this product is that as we add back the communication network to the network of life, we see the whole system come back online. It's a lot like my cell phone. I was just down in Costa Rica at a big regen conference the last 4 days, took a red eye in here to get to Los Angeles, landed. It was a lot like coming in a near-death experience where you snap back in the body, like, why did I come back? It was much better in heaven. Anyway, it came back into the body in Los Angeles today, and I can tell you that the leap from one of those spaces, jungles, waterfalls, swimming every day with that regen team, to this experience of 4 hours of traffic and pounding in here and just this parking garage alone, and then 70,000 people off-gassing plastics, the whole experience. Thank God I'm at the Natural Health Expo. That jungle yesterday was horrible. It saved my life in here, obviously. So you start to realize that it's our reverse engineering ourselves out of nature that has gotten us to the point where we would call this a Natural Health Expo. Right? God bless us. We're all trying damn hard. We're all trying, there's no judgment on us, it's just a reflection on the irony of being human right now. We need the journey, is my big story. And so we actually needed to invent Roundup to find out that the microbiome was our foundation for life, so that we would help our children imagine a world where they understood that the nature around them and within them was where their life would leap out of. The doctors of the future will no longer believe that it's a sterile human body that is a healthy human body. We needed the journey to our near extinction event to completely reverse directions and go back into that jungle, go back into these ferns, go back into the high tundras of the earth, and sample what nature has for us. And I guarantee you it will begin with the word grace. It takes only a little bit of observation of the beauty of nature to be welcomed right back into an abundance that you cannot imagine. And that's the story this product keeps showing us. The speed at which we injure is about 10 times slower than the speed of healing. Let me repeat that. The speed of injury is 10 times slower than the speed of healing, which is exciting because I just gave you a 50, 60-year journey into the extinction event of humanity. And the scientists are telling us we only have 8 to 10 years left to reverse everything or we go extinct. The oceans will acidify, we'll lose 97% of life on Earth. These are our current predictions, 8 or 10 years. And everybody out there in the science community, Davos, etc., is saying we're screwed. We can't fix this thing now. Because they assume that the linear progress towards healing is at the same rate of the damage done. And the good news is 10 times faster. In 5 years, we could be the healthiest country in the world if we reconnect to nature at all of her levels. The children born in 2035 will either be 1 in 3 with the autism spectrum disorder, is where we're going right now, 1 in 3, or we will see the end of that epidemic and our children will dream a different future. And those born in 2035 will see a future that they are reconnected to all elements of nature. So as you start to integrate this product into your life, you're going to experience an accelerated rate of healing. And that may or may not be palpable in the first day or 2 or even months. But I can guarantee you that it will be felt by those around you before you, oftentimes. People will start to comment, what are you doing? Why is this bright, glowy thing happening around you? It's because you're literally liberating more light energy out of the food you eat when you become coherent with the entire mitochondrial and metabolic pathways of the gut to the mitochondrial level. You will begin to glow. This is an exciting journey into your reconnection to your full potential. I believe this is the only product in this entire expo that is designed to do nothing to your body. Everything else is trying to do something to your body. Vitamin C is an incredible antibiotic. It delivers a massive amount of hydrogen peroxide to the gut, kills microbes, does all kinds of crazy things that you wouldn't want to do. But vitamin C, that's got to be good for you, right? You chronically get on any of these things that are doing things to your body, and you start to separate yourself from nature. Nature, it turns out, wasn't waiting for a bottle of 90 encapsulated herbs and spices or anything else to save you. These are band-aids that we're putting on to get us back in touch with nature. And so I hope that's how our product feels to you as well. We know that we will run out of the raw material that we make this from, which is fossil soil, in the next 100, 150 years. My hope is that we don't have to use that anymore in the next 30 years because we're growing such vital soils on the planet that your children and grandchildren are getting this in every bite of food that was grown in a regenerative organic fashion, reconnected to their own nature, and we forget the entire supplement industry ever existed by 2050. That's the future I would like to see for our children. Because the idea of supplementing nature is ludicrous. She wasn't here to be supplemented, she was here to be supple. She was here to nurture you with her nature. And so I am eager for us to see our own company put out of business. And so for this, thank you all of my employees that are here who are so determined to put our own company out of business, have been kind enough, just as our angel investors who've never gotten $1 back from any of their investments. They're 8 years in and have no money back from us, and we just keep saying that we're going to probably save the world, and we're like, that's good enough. They've never gotten any money back because we've been channeling all of our money that we make out of the supplement company into our nonprofits, into our for-profit incubators of research and development. And it's been a real joy to see Farmers Footprint, our first nonprofit effort, which is under Project Biome, get more traction than iON ever has. And so here's a nonprofit spawned out of a story of soil that we discovered under the microscope, and we monetized through an effort towards getting the fossil soil grace back into your children and grandchildren and the rest. And now when I travel and I go into a coffee shop in the UK or a little permaculture garden spot down in Timbawadi, South Africa, people start crying and come and give me giant hugs because they heard a promise that nature could heal us. And they have changed their lives in South Africa, in the UK, in Australia, in Kenya. They have changed their lives and their farms, and they've started farming again because they learned that nature had a solution for the crisis that was happening in their lives. Each of you, so many of you at least, have come up to me today and so many other places to tell me your story, how iON reconnected you to a journey towards your own health. And I'm always overjoyed when I hear those stories and it's not associated with the product itself. Nobody comes up and says, iON healed me. I started taking iON and suddenly this happened in my life. That's the right story. Because this doesn't do anything to you. This is just the communication system. This doesn't hit a single receptor in your body. It doesn't turn on a genetic pathway. This isn't something that's trying to make you different than you originally were designed to be. This is returning you to your original map. And so the only product in this whole expo that was designed to help you hear yourself. Just as the cell phone tower came back on my cell phone as I came off the plane today, I suddenly got a bunch of text messages and all this that hadn't been coming through because who knows why. But I was not connected to the grid in the same way. Suddenly this morning on the way into LA, I'm updating all of the information from all of my community. And I'm hearing great things. I'm hearing amazing stories of my father's health recovery in the last 4 weeks. All kinds of cool stuff happening on my text messages today. And I felt a joy for humanity because I was back connected. The cell phone tower of your human cell is the mitochondria. This is the amplification system for it. So your cell phone can always transmit, but if it's not near that amplifier of the cell phone tower, you can't get the information across. So this is connecting with your mitochondrial metabolism and creating a carrier system for those signals to get long distances. So the mitochondria is the cell phone, this is your cell phone tower, And when you put those together, suddenly the cell knows where the injuries are, the cell knows where the resources are, and the cell starts producing more energy. I always upset all the people that I work for because they always spill the beans on new stuff too fast. We don't even have that paper out yet, blah, blah, blah. But this is so damn cool, and it kind of closes the loop on my whole story. I'm going to tell you all of the new science that's about to come out. You guys will be able to see this in our upcoming white papers. Discovered by accident, as everything I've ever discovered in science is never because I asked the right question. It's always because I asked the wrong question or a completely irrelevant question and accidentally saw something new on the way in. And that's what happened 3 months ago when we were proving out a bunch of safety stuff for Canada to finally put the stuff on the shelf, all this silly stuff. A third-party lab sent us back information that this product, which has no calories in it, it has no glucose, no fatty acids, no caloric source. As soon as it touched cells, the cells started making more ATP, more energy. We started doing a whole slew of science to figure out how the hell that is possible, because as an endocrinologist, I can tell you that's impossible. Long story short, over the last few months, we've been able to demonstrate that this calorie-free product actually accelerates the production of energy out of the reservoir that's already in the cell. It is reconnecting the mitochondria to its reservoir of energy. This is going to be the reversal of the 5 decades that I just told you about, that started with obesity. We will solve obesity as a phenomenon when we reconnect people to the calories that live within their bodies, by allowing the mitochondria to reshape themselves. And that's actually what seems to be happening with iON. iON accelerates the repair rate because the communication network is there, so everything starts to repair. One of the first things that repairs is complex protein structures, the tight junctions. See, the leaky gut phenomenon goes away, not because iON fixes it, but because your own cells realize they're leaking and they increase the amount of protein and you get more tight junctions in a matter of minutes. Same thing happening at the small proteins inside the cell that keep the mitochondria in their three-dimensional relationship to one another and their three-dimensional shape within the mitochondria itself. The mitochondria is a very strange shape. It's two organisms within one, and the relationship between them is this accordion-like folding of the inside cell, the methane-producing bacterium inside. If it loses that accordion folding, it can no longer create ATP or energy out of your glucose and fatty acids. When you put this stuff on there, you get the protein synthesis going, the mitochondria go back to their right relationship in 3 dimensions, and they start accessing the information and energy that was already in your body. And so in the end, this is a lot like one of those plugs you use in Europe or wherever you're going. Trying to plug in, you don't got the damn right plug, and you're like, Jesus, my cell phone's almost dead, I'm stuck in Heathrow, what the hell am I going to do? This is the adapter. This is literally the adapter between an enormous energy reserve within your body and the cells that need the energy. This is the adapter that you will plug your body back into your original energy source, which is the sun that powers our solar system. You are a light being that is burning bright. Not as bright as you used to because you've been eating and drinking and bathing in Roundup for a couple of decades. But as we plug you back in and use the adapter and the antidote to that disconnect, and we reconnect you, you are going to show a brighter version of yourself in these next weeks, years, and decades ahead. And healing is 10 times faster than the disease process itself. So let's heal. Let's go forward and heal this planet by getting out of her way, because she knows what she's doing. She has been here for the beauty of humanity. She imagined us into her reality. We need to imagine ourselves back into that reality, and we will come into right relationship with all things, and we can all stop making supplements, and we can start sharing meals around supper tables again, and we will celebrate the condition of fellowship, the condition of human life together. And I'm so glad to be in community with all of you. It's been an honor to be with you over this last decade. So many of you have been on this journey. Albert, my gosh, you look younger than the day we met you. You are drinking your ion. Well done. Getting it in, my friend. He is the OG. And so it has been awesome to watch the journey of all of us in this company as we have gotten younger. And we've done it biologically for sure. And we have amazing healing stories throughout our company. People who 3 days into the journey of this product, their whole life turned around, all of their diseases went away, and so they came and applied for a job. And so our company is full of people that were first touched by their own capacity, their own replugging into nature and their own healing. And that's that level of loyalty and passion that's behind this product. When we tell you stories, it's from our heart because it's our families that were healed by it. And so this has been our journey. We're excited that you're part of it. We welcome you to our family because we are all indigenous to this planet. We are all human. We're in a tiny little blue marble floating in the middle of space that happens to be at a chakra center of the universe. And I think the universe is all cheering us on, telling us to stand back up, you little toddlers, you got this. Right now we're just holding on to the edge of the coffee table trying to stand up for the first time. We're going to stand up, and God bless us, if not in 10 years we're not out there running on the playing fields together of life. And we are changing the energy of this universe through a center of heart that gives us hope and gives us the vibration of love. And it's all through the witness of beauty, to that nature that's welcoming us back in with open arms and an abundance that we can't imagine. And so thank you for being part of this journey with us. We're honored to be seeing ourselves in the faces and smiles here. If you don't know me yet, I'm the biggest hugger on earth. I've been accused of being the masculine manifestation of Amma, the hugging saint. And so come give me a freaking hug and let's get this party on, because we're human and we all showed up right now to let everything heal. Thank you all for being here.